Okay, let's get started. Can everybody hear me? If I can just get a thumbs up or something from one or two people. Great, thank you, Austin. All right, excellent. Welcome to Excel Like a Pro. I'm your host, Dr. Tom Franza. If you're wondering, yes, I am the person behind all those emails you get. I am the Director of Infrastructure and Computing here at Gettysburg College. And prior to that, I've done many, many things. Excel is like one of my things. Rod Toston, who's my boss, asked me to do an Excel class, and I'm like, okay, but who wants to sign up to the world's most boring class? And yet, many of you did, and I'm glad. Excel is like really cool. I've taught it for many years. One of my favorite classes when I worked at Dowling College was quantitative methods in business. And if we have enough time, I'll show you like the solver add-in, which is like really cool. There's lots of other add-ins. So in this class, what we're going to be doing, there we go, is we're just going to be looking at Excel. And I'm going to try to give you some tips and tricks. I only have an hour with you. And when I've taught Excel, it can tend to be a whole course, entire semester long. But I want to give you some tips and tricks just to help get you to the next level, or maybe just to get you curious that you want to dig more. And I'll give you references to stuff so you can look some of this stuff up if you want to get further information. So one of the most important things, and this to me is, it really separates out good spreadsheets from bad spreadsheets, is the design. Unlike a word processing program where you may just be able to jump into it and start typing away and out will come wonderful things, spreadsheets need to be planned ahead of time. And a lot of times what I'll do is I'll do it on pen and paper before I take it to put it out on an Excel itself. We're going to play with some formulas, and we'll do that through one of the examples that I'm going to give you, which is a gradebook that I had created over the years. We're going to play with pivot tables because they're really cool. And then from pivot tables, we're going to kind of pivot into graphics and charts, and we're going to turn our pivot table into a chart. And you'll see that while Excel does charts quickly and easily, they need to be tweaked a little bit to make them look nicer. And then if we have some time, we'll play with add-ins. I used to teach macros, but I really don't do that anymore because Excel, Microsoft, they don't really want you using macros because that's a way to bring viruses and bad stuff into your computer. So really be careful if you do use macros. As I mentioned, so we're going to start off with an academic gradebook as we warm into this. We'll then play with pivot tables, which is more of a financial application. And then from pivot tables, we're going to do a chart, which is more fun, and that's going to be the cool stuff. Then we'll do some add-ins as well. Okay. As I mentioned before, layout is key. All right. You need to see what you're doing. It is, and also do not be afraid to start over. So just to give you an example, one of my students, he'd been working on a spreadsheet and he put hours into it. And it was supposed to help with the flight school to be able to organize, and just like, it took a lot of different things into consideration. And he was like, I'm stuck, Tom, can you help me? And I'm like, of course. And we sat down and we were working on the spreadsheet. And as we were working on it, and he was explaining it to me, we were able to start to restructure it. And we got to a point and I'm like, we need to redo this. We can't fix what we have. It's not going to work. And he's like, but you don't understand. He put hours into it, and he did. He spent days working on this thing. And I said, I get that. And it's painful. I said, but we can either now spend further days trying to shoehorn what you have into what you want, or now that we know what you want, I would bet within 2 to 3 hours, we can create it in a cleaner, neater fashion. And that's what we decided to do, and that's what we did. But it's tough. You don't want to start over. It's like, you put so much time and energy into this creation, you don't want to let it go. But sometimes that's the best thing to do. The other thing is, you got to clean up your data. I can't tell you how many times when I'm brought in to fix a spreadsheet, that is the first thing I have to do. I look at the data and it's like, okay, are the dates set properly as dates, or are they text fields? Do you have empty columns, empty rows? Do you have hashtags all over the place? So clean, neat. The last thing I'd recommend to everybody is that with Excel, it's a workbook and there are multiple sheets. So because of that, what you really want to do is break the sheets down so that things are neat and clean. And I'll show you an example of that when we do the gradebook. So most people will notice at the bottom, you've got the little tabs. That's what separates out our different worksheets. And what I usually like to do is my front page is a summary. That's, I think that today they call it a dashboard, but it's kind of what you need in a nutshell, just the basics. Then you have the data sheets, which have more. That's where if somebody wants to get into it. And again, I'll show you with the gradebook what I'm talking about. And last but not least, I like to have my tables, my constants, things that I need that I will refer to. And so in my tables with my, the one that I do for my students is it has all the grades and stuff. And I'll show you that in just a second. Another thing that when you're creating your spreadsheet, you want to do cell references. And by default, Excel is set up for relative. What that means is that when you copy and paste across, the formulas move accordingly. When you copy and paste down, the formulas move accordingly. But from time to time, you're going to want to reference something that's a constant, let's say sales tax. When you do that, you want to use something called absolute cell addressing. And what that says is when you put a $ before either the column, the number, the sheet, what it will do is it will say, when you copy and paste across or down, it will never switch. And again, I'll show you that when we move into the example. F4 is a quick little way to toggle between them, but I just use it. For this, some of the popular functions that we're going to be playing with first are if, sum if and count if, round and round up, and Vlookup. The reason why we're going to be playing with those is just so you could see some of the formulas. If is an incredibly powerful formula because it allows you to do conditions. And in my the one that I'm going to show you for the gradebook, you'll see that if there's a bunch of, there's no value in a cell, it'll present a 0 rather than no value, or it'll present no value at all rather than an error, especially if you're trying to do a mathematical formula, you can't divide by 0. So I'll show you how that looks to make it clean. We'll play with logical tests, and let's just jump into the example. This is just some of the stuff that we're looking at. Okay, let me find my gradebook. Okay, so here we have a gradebook. And as I was mentioning before, to keep it a clean layout, you'll see that everything kind of fits to a page. So here is my roster. This is the main page, and you'll see that I have a course and a section. And if we wanted to call this, sample course and first section, we can do that. Now, what I've done is that to keep things clean and neat, when you type something here on my other cell, on my other sheets, it pulls that information. So you can see here where it says sample course, it's saying roster A1. It's pointing back to here. This kind of goes back to old school data entry. You never want to enter a value more than once because there is a chance that you could make a mistake. So what I do with my spreadsheet is here I enter my students' names on the main page, and then for each other page, it automatically fills in that information. Just to give you an example, if the last name was Franza, you'll now see that for every page, it updates it. So this is what I mean about clean and neat. You don't want to have to enter things multiple times. Now, with your assignments, you'll see that it's pulling this number from my assignments tab. Notice that each of my tabs has a name that's useful to me because it makes it easier. And the reason why you want to do this is because, so like an example, let's say a student comes and says, you're curious about a grade, something didn't seem quite right. Well, if let's say the discussion board, I couldn't figure that out, I can specifically come to the discussion board tab, and here is all the information that I need. When playing with discussion boards, what I'll do is you'll see that this is just a simple sum of this row. And then the way that the grade is calculated is it does a little funky formula, and this is where if comes in. I say if some condition is met, in this case, S4, and I subtract V4, which is the total posts. Long story short, 14 weeks in a course, you're supposed to post to the discussion board twice a week. That's where the number 28 comes from. But I didn't want to hard code that. Remember before I was saying making a reference to it? Because suppose it was a 15-week course. I'd want to be able to update these numbers, but if I don't do it in a clean fashion, I'd have to go and update each and every cell to make sure the formula is correct. Side story, one of the places that I was working at, my boss loved Lotus 1-2-3 and was working on giving people their cost of living adjustment. One of the people that worked with me, instead of getting a 3% cost of living adjustment, got a 1.5% cost of living adjustment. So when I said no, you gave him 1.5%, not 3%, because I could do the math in my head. He said, no, look, and he showed me the spreadsheet. Now, in the spreadsheet, while he put 3% over here, because he had hard coded into the formula, what had happened is that while he could change this number to whatever he wanted, it didn't matter because this formula was hard coded. So the person didn't get the proper adjustment. So luckily we caught it and we were able to fix it, or I caught it. But the key is that that's why you don't want to hard code a number into a formula if you can avoid it. You want to make a reference over here and then reference it. And that's why we use the absolute cell referencing. Now, a cute little thing that I do is I look at the number of times that they've posted versus the number of times that they were supposed to post. If it's greater than or equal to 0, then it puts 100 in there. What that means is that if these were all zeros, then it would put a 0. That lets me know that they've never added any or never mentioned anything for the grade. And then what I'll do is I look at what they've done, and it's called Roundup. What Roundup does is it looks at, so there's 2 different formulas. When you can deal with Roundup, that's more than that. Yes, we are recording this as we're doing this. So hopefully the recording won't have lag. So what'll happen is that when it looks at the grades, if you do round, if it's less than, and let's say we're rounding to the nearest whole number, if it's 0.49 or less, it rounds down. If it's 0.5 or higher, it rounds up. If you use the round up function, it will always go to the higher number. So this is kind of cool. So like I do this when I'm grading. So what happens is that, well, you know what it's like. You'll have a student, you're right on the cusp, between the current grade and the next grade. Well, what this does is this gives the student the benefit of the doubt, and it rounds the grade up. So your grade would be higher rather than potentially lower, because nothing stinks more than getting a 0.44 and it going down when it could have gone up. So that's how the roundup function works. Let's see. Another fun one is, so remember before I said tables? So this, what this helps to do, and I'll show you Vlookup in just a second. This table has how the grades were broken down at the college that I was teaching at. And it says, okay, if you get a 93 or higher, it's an A. The reason why I have the 97 here is that college actually offered an A+. And if you got a 97 or higher, that was an A+. And actually, let's play with that for a second. Okay, so you see the student here, first day, and they have an A. I'll show you that. Let's change this to an A+. Now, what'll happen is that you'll see that now they have an A+. And this is kind of why I was mentioning before, if you hard code things in here, especially things that are supposed to be constants, it's going to make life difficult when you have to update or modify it. What I would tell my students is when you make a spreadsheet, you want to make a spreadsheet that you design, but somebody else will use. And the reason why you want to do that is because that's going to help you make them cleaner easier. And you also, not only want somebody else to use it, you're going to want somebody else in the future to be able to modify it. You don't want your spreadsheets to be locked to you forever. The reason being is that this is something that you do, but you don't want to be doing this all the time. You want people to be able to empower themselves. So now we're going to look at the VLOOKUP, and there's a VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP. V is vertical, H is horizontal. That's the only difference. What it's going to do is it's going to look at the number, and based on the number, it's going to come across to the graph, and whatever it sees to the right, that's what it's going to use. You can modify it slightly, so it can either give quality points or quality. That's up to you, but I'll show you how that works. So when the VLOOKUP happens, and the reason why the numbers are in this order, because it's going to see 93. Oh, is it 93 or higher? So if I did this in reverse, everybody would get an F. So just a minor note, when you play with VLOOKUPs, you'll see this. But if somebody has a 90 or higher, they get an A minus. An 87 or higher, they get a B plus. An 83 to 87, they get a B. And it kind of does the tapping. So let's take a look at that. So when I say VLOOKUP, H4, which is this one, it says, look at letter grade. Letter grade is just what this is. I named these letter grades. I named this table that. That's why you see letter grade range here, just so it's a reminder. It says, okay, letter grade, and then it says go over to. So what it does is it comes here to letter grade. It looks at what's the grade. It's above a 97, and it goes over 2 to A plus. I could, if I change this, if I made this 1, I don't know why I would do that. What it would do is it would give me the first one. It would give me the 97. Could do it if you wanted to. But if I made it a 3, what that would do is that would give me quality points. And I could copy and paste that down. And now it would give everybody their quality points rather than their letter grade. Or they got the appropriate quality, whether it was excellent to unsatisfactory. And that's it. So the VLOOKUP is really, it's a powerful tool. And simply what it does is you tell it to look at a cell, it sees the value in that cell, and it will compare that to a table, and then it'll give you whatever is corresponding to it based on the column that you tell it. So it is really a useful, powerful function. The if function is always a good one. So in this case, what this if function does is it looks and it says if the sum from C4 to P4 is 0, what that means is nobody has entered a value in it, right? That would be the start of the semester. Give me 0. Otherwise, give me the average. Now you say, Tom, why wouldn't you just do the average of C4 to P4? And actually, if you said, I hope I spelled that right, C4 to P4, because I broke it, that's why. But if what would happen is it would return the equivalent of, there's no cell in this value, it would pretty much be the equivalent of, let's just do this. Okay. Oh, because I'm sorry. See, this is what happens when you do things in the morning. There we go. Okay, so it'll give me the average of 0. Now, normally, when you do this, technically, this should come back as undefined. So that's and there you go. So what's happening is that when I say the average, because there is nothing here, it's giving me a division by 0. And it says, I don't like that, and I'm not happy. And that's not clean. And that's why, oh, and just so you know, they'll see that little green. What that's doing is Excel saying this formula doesn't match any of the ones around it. So, which makes sense because I modified it. So let's put that back. So really, by just using it, I can use it to do cool math things, but in this case, I'm just using it to keep my spreadsheet clean. And again, I like doing that because I want my spreadsheet to be clean, concise. I don't want a bunch of hash marks all over the place. And so that is how we can use those formulas to do things of that nature. And in some cases, right now, I just use totals, counts, again, just to keep myself in mind. Another thing that I would recommend that you do is you need to keep your spreadsheet, you want to test it for all values. So what you would do, and that's kind of what I was doing with playing with here, is by breaking down the grades, you can see that people go from, in this case, an A+ all the way down. I want to make sure things work. Try for all hundreds, try for all zeros, see what happens, because more often than not, your spreadsheet will work 99% of the time. But the problem is that 1% of the time, things go bad. So you want to make sure that you have things taken into consideration. Okay, that was my simple little gradebook that like I said, that I played with for years and tweaked it and shaped it. But it's one of those things that as you get more comfortable with it, it keeps things clean and neat. And again, you can see everything, you give the main stuff that somebody needs. And then if you want to get more details, that's what these data tabs are for. You can get the detail you need that therefore explains what you've got over here. And then your last one is going to be for your tables. For anything that is your constants, you're going to want them to be here. So it's clean and easy for somebody to look up. As a matter of fact, if the next version of this one, if I was playing with it, I would probably take the discussion board and I would take these and I would move them over to this table. Again, just to keep it clean and keep it on the side. Okay, are we ready to go to pivot tables? Because they're fun. Okay, we don't need to say that. All right. So why use pivot tables? Pivot tables are great for taking kind of what we were doing before, large sets of data, except even larger sets of data, and bringing them down to their core pieces. By doing that, we can reduce confusion. We can create dashboards, which are all the rage. And just again, what you're doing is you're taking complex data and you're bringing it down to something that somebody can understand, that somebody else can digest. Because if you give somebody too much data, they become overwhelmed, they shut down, and now you can't do what needs to be done. Who uses pivot tables? Both of my brother-in-laws. One works for the Federal Reserve, another's a Wall Street guy. They love their pivot tables. So anybody that makes money for a living, probably, serious big bank, they use pivot tables. But again, it's joking aside, what it is it comes down to, you want to have a large data set, you're going to break it down. And I'm going to show you two examples. One is just a basic one where we're going to have a lot of data and we want to figure out regional sales for each of our quarters for a specific year. So that's kind of what we're going to look into. We can find pivot tables under the insert menu, and you'll see, and what we're going to do is, this is kind of some of the basic stuff. One of the things I do want to mention, I've kind of said it before, but it really runs true with pivot tables. No blank columns, no blank cells, no blank rows, no merged cells, okay? Because the moment that will freak out the pivot table. Everything has to be clean, neat, and organized. If there are blank columns or there are blank rows, it's gonna mess up. And I'll show you why in a second. Okay, so this is the example that we're gonna do, but rather than show you boring slides, let's just jump right into it. I don't want that one. Let's go for this one. Okay. Oh, also, just so you know, for my pivot table data, I borrowed this from John Akampora over at Excel Campus. I'll give you a link at the end for him. He's awesome. The two pivot tables that I'm going over, he goes over them in detail, and he does a couple other stuff too. So again, John is a good guy. And if you want further Excel stuff, you can definitely go there and find it. So No worries. So first things first, now, not so important today, but in the future, you need to understand your data. If you don't understand your data, guess what? Your pivot tables are going to be useless. As a matter of fact, my daughter was applying for a job, and one of the things that they gave her for the job interview is they wanted to know how good she would be at analyzing data. And they gave her like just a ton of data. And she was like, Dad, help. And I said, well, all right, I will help you, but under this circumstance, send me the data set. I'll take a look at it. But here's the catch. I want you to look at it, and then you tell me what you see. And so it just so happened that what they did is they actually sent the data, and she looked at it, and she was able to break it down, and she explained it to me, and she did a damn good job of it. And I said, yes. And then together we pieced out that it was actually an advertising campaign that they had previously done. And there was some discrepancies in the advertising campaign that led to questions that she asked. But again, it comes down to understanding your data. If you don't understand it, you can't do anything with it. So if we're going to insert a pivot table, the first thing we want to do is we want to click somewhere in our data set. This is why you don't want to have missing columns or rows, because when I go to insert and I insert a pivot table, Excel is going to look across and it's going to look down until it sees a break. When it sees a break, it's going to say, oh, that's the end of my data set. So if I had, let's get this out here for a second. If I had additional data over here, or if I had additional data over here, it's not going to see it, because what it's going to do is if it's here, it's going to go across and it's going to go up and down until it sees a break. As a matter of fact, watch, I'm going to do this and I'm going to say pivot table. You notice over here, it says there's no range. It's like, what are you talking about, Tom? I don't understand. Whereas if I come here and I can click anywhere in my data set and I say pivot table, all of a sudden it says, oh, I got you. And you can see with my little dotted line that's moving, it's actually selected my whole data set. In this case, John also named this range table 1, but that's okay. You'll see in the other one that it doesn't call it table 1, and that's not a big deal. So I say, okay. When I have this, I've got, it's looking at each of my columns, my column headers, and those column headers are important because you need to know what's in that column. And it says, here's what you got. So now, knowing that I have sales over quarters, what I do is I figure out, okay, how do I want my pivot table to look? So I want to know by region. That's what I'm interested in. So I click region and I drag it to rows. Right, so now I've got my 4 regions: Midwest, Northeast, South, and West. Well, what do I want to know about these regions? I want to know the revenue. I want to know how much each region is making. So again, I click and I drag to values. Now, here's a cool thing that what pivot tables do is it says, you see it changed revenues to sum of revenues. And what it is doing is it's doing a sum if. Remember, I was telling you before that there's the if and there's variants of the ifs, there's count if, sum if. So what it's doing is it's saying sum if for the revenue field if it's for the Midwest region, and it adds all the Midwest regions up. And then it says, okay, if it's sum if it's Northeast, and that's how I get this. As a matter of fact, let's play with that, just to give you an idea. Here's my regions. I can say, just show me the Midwest. I think that'll work for us, right? And now you can see that my revenue for the Midwest is 10,402. It also shows you down here, bottom right, and that there are 15, I guess, sales that happened during the year 2013, 2014. So that's it's kind of cool. Oops, silly me. So then I'd go back to here and I'd say region, and let's go back, let's select all because we want to look with. Okay. So now this is kind of cute, but now we probably want more because, well, this is nice to know the sum for each of them. I really would probably want it broken down by quarter. So what I do is I take quarter and I make that my columns. And now you can see that I have, not only do I have the total for the Midwest for the years, I also have it for each quarter. Last but not least, this is great, but because my data expands multiple years, I'm probably going to want to filter it by year. So I take my year and I drag it to my filter. And you see how it popped up over here? And now I can click and I'm like, let's see, the 2014 works. And now I've got this cute little table, my little pivot table, that I can now look and see that, well, in a glance, for the Midwest for Q1, there were no sales. Also, just, I don't mean to be anal retentive, but if we right click here and I see value field settings, I change the number format because it's supposed to be currency, but we don't need, because the numbers are large enough, we don't need decimal points. I mean, we don't need cents, we just need dollars. We say, okay. Now it just gives it a little bit cleaner, a little bit neater. Other things, when you get old like me, you might want to make the numbers larger. Okay, but again, this is it. And then what I would do is I would rename this sheet to something, something more relevant. So maybe region overview or something like that. But again, what this does is it's just, I've just taken a huge amount of data, not really huge, it's not, but a decent amount of data, and I've broken it down into something that somebody could see. And now by looking at this data, this could say, okay, Midwest had no sales for Q1, and both the Northeast and South had no sales for Q4. Why is that? And now I need to ask questions, right? Because is there something wrong with my data, or is there a reason behind that? I can also see who my top, my Q3 is my best quarter, and Q2 is my worst quarter. I can see which, the Northeast region has the least number of sales, and the West region has the most number of sales as far as revenue is concerned. So again, small, clean, simple pivot table that gives me a lot of data into a short area so that now I can ask questions. And this was 2014. If I want, I could see how things were in 2013 and it adjusts accordingly. So does that work for everybody? Are we okay? Or it's a Monday morning and it's mean for me to do this to you? Okay. So let's do another pivot table, but let's add a chart into it. And that way you can just, again, you can see the pivot table one more time. Okay, we don't need to save that because we can always recreate it whenever we want. Okay, here's another pivot table. This one has sales reps, and it has my different sales reps and how much money they've sold over the years. So again, if I want to create a pivot table, the first thing I have to do is I do a quick look over my data and I make sure that there are no like empty columns or empty rows. All my data is where it needs to be. So that's good. Each of my columns has a header. Ah, okay. Emily asked a question, and here's what I'm going to do. So I'm assuming, Emily, you mean with my gradebook, correct? And that way, Emily will say, yes, I think that's what she means. And then I will show her that. I'll show you guys that. If not, Emily asked that question. Okay, perfect. So what we'll do is, do me a favor, Emily, you remind me at the end because I'm absent-minded. And I will pull that up and I'll show that for you because that's important. So, and what that is that actually, when you have a spreadsheet, You can reference other spreadsheets, and I'll show you how we did that in the gradebook. I'll pull that one back up. Let's just, while we're on pivot tables, let's do the pivot table, and I will make sure that I answer that for you. So now that we have this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert. So I've clicked somewhere in my data set, and I can't tell you how many times I don't click in a data set, and when I say insert pivot table, it's like, why doesn't it see my data? And it's like, oh. So I got that, and that's my data, and I say, okay. Again, notice that Excel creates a new sheet to put my data, to put my pivot table on. So that's what it does by default. And so, okay, I've got this. What am I going to do? Well, in this case, I want to know about my salespeople. So I say salesperson, and that's what my rows are. And in this one, I want to know their revenue or what they make, right? How much they've been selling. So I'm going to say revenue, and that's the value. Now, another cute little thing to notice here is that not only by default, it says sum. I can change this to give me a count and so there's multiple things I can do here other than just the sum of the revenue. Now, why I would want to do an average of the revenue or a count of the revenue, ain't got no clue. But there could be something where I may want to know the number of times a transaction happened, and then I could use count, or I may want to know the average rather than the overall. So I have those options, and that's just the little triangle here, value field settings, and then I can change it. I could also change it over here too if I wanted to. So now I have, let's take this, and again, just sorry, but a little bit larger. Okay, so what I would do here is I could look at this and say, all right, I've got each of my sales reps and I've got the sum of their revenue. So how much they brought in revenue. Now, what I could do here is I could click here and I could right click and I could say field options, number format. And again, just want to make it currency. I don't need that, and I can say okay. And say okay. All right, just to make it look a little bit cleaner. Now, what I could also do is you'll see that the way that the revenue is broken out, right now these people are listed by, I guess it's alphabetical order, first name. That doesn't do me any good. What I might want to do, I would right click over here where I'm in my revenue and say sort, and then do largest to smallest. And now I can see who my top sellers are and who my top and who aren't. And this in and of itself could be helpful, right? I could look and say, okay, you know, Nancy is my top seller with over $17,000 worth of revenue, and Jan is only at 979. This could help me then to say, okay, why is there just the discrepancy? Maybe Jan is new. Maybe Jan's territory is significantly smaller. Maybe Jan is assigned to only one client. We don't know, but these would be the questions we ask. Remember, as the manager, as the director, it's our job to make sure that our employees have all the tools and resources they need so they could be successful. So maybe there's something that maybe Jan and Robert need to help them be more successful, like Nancy and Andrew. Okay, so now that we have this, let's make a chart. People like charts, right? Charts are a great visual way to display numbers. Some people, I don't know who they are, don't like numbers, okay? I love numbers, but some people don't like numbers, and when they see numbers, it turns them off. So if we can create a nice little chart, then they could see that, and especially for dashboards, it looks really good. People like that. So what I would do is I would come over here and I would say analyze, and then I have pivot chart. So pivot table tools, analyze. I think in older versions of Excel, it doesn't say pivot table tools, it just is the word analyze, but you'll find it, it's there. And I want to do a pivot chart. So now when doing a pivot chart, you can see, just like in Excel when we're doing charts, right? You have a plethora of things to choose. So in this case, I'm going to say, let's do a bar chart. okay? Because that's the one that John does. So that way, if you need to go, you can also watch his video and it'll take you through all the same steps. So here's what I'm gonna do though. Before we get started, I'm gonna just copy this guy, because here is something, and Excel has been notorious for this for a long time. Excel can create charts, and it creates excellent charts very easily. The problem is they're not pretty. They're not, so what we're gonna do is, this is the original down here. We're gonna modify this one up here just so you can see the difference. So now these little guys over here are cute because they can allow me to like change what I have here, but I don't want to do that. So what I would do is I right click on these and I say hide all field buttons, because the people who are going to be looking this aren't going to want to be changing the fields. They just want to see what I have. Another funny thing, and I don't know why, our data is sorted from highest to lowest, and for some reason Excel says I'm going to flip that on you. Why? Because Excel can, but it's not a big deal. If I click on my names here, I can right click, and I think it's format axis. And you see here it says categories in reverse order. And oh, that's another thing too. In Excel, you don't have to memorize where everything is. You usually, just try a couple of things until you find the one that works. But now I want to categorize in reverse order, and you'll see it flipped it. So now this now matches this. So that looks a little bit cleaner. Now, the next thing, let's see, what do we want to do? All right, let's start cleaning it up. I don't like these numbers here. They're evil. So I click on them, and you see how they're now outlined, and I can delete that. The total here doesn't really give me much because you kind of would assume that. So we get rid of that. And these little lines aren't doing it much. So what you do is, let me break it again. So if you click, you see here, it's outlining everything. If I hit delete, Excel will say, I don't like you, that's not nice. I want my little bars to go away. So now you'll see there's a little circle next to each one, and they're all highlighted, and I delete them. So now that we've got that, it's starting to look cleaner, but I need to have the numbers here somewhere. So I need the data labels. So there's two ways to do it. I can click on my little plus here and see my data labels, or I usually forget about that because it's just old school. So I right click on it and I say add data labels. Now, one of the funny things, and I don't know why Excel does it, you'll see how my data labels, especially the top one, is bleeding over into my, I don't know why it does that. So, but if you shrink this guy a little bit, it usually will pop in. So now it's cleaner because you don't want that number over that. What else do we want to do? Okay, these bars are a little thin. So if I wanted to make them a little wider, I can right click on it. And I believe it's format data series. Yes, great. And now you see the gap width. I always get these flipped. You want the gap width to be smaller because the gap width is the distance between the bars. So instead of 182, maybe let's bring that down to like, I don't know, 68. And you see now they got a little more heft to them. It fills up the space. I think that looks good. Last but not least, this is a horrible title. And so you would say something maybe like revenue by sales rep or sales rep revenue. And then the other thing you would do is like an example for this, sales revenue by rep for, and I think this was December 2014 was when this data set was created. It's an old data set, but it works. And you can see, I mean, you've got your nice pivot table, you've just created a chart, and just, I mean, look at the difference. It is, go away. It is night and day, right? This is something somebody would want to see. While this shows, they show the same exact data, The first one lets the people know what they're looking at. It gives it in the order that the chart has it. The labels are where they need to be. It's just cleaner, it's neater, and it brings the whole thing together. So it's almost like the difference between good and great is only 10%. So give the 10%. Okay, let's close that. Actually, we're doing good on time. You don't need to save that because we can always recreate it. And this is just what we were playing with. Again, just a breakout. The filter was the top right here. So normally when I create them, I start with my rows because that's the data that I want to, how I want to break the data out. I then go by what is the data I want to see, which is my values. Then once I've got the bottom two, then I'm like, okay, is there more information? Do I want to dig deeper? If so, then I go with my columns. And last but not least, if I know that I'm dealing with something that spans multiple years, or there's some other thing that I would want to sort by or filter by, then that's my last one, the filters. So I usually do rows first, then values, then columns, then filters. Okay, and that's what we were playing with. Okay, and then we like that. All right, that's in case Excel wasn't playing nicely, I have a backup, but let's go. Okay, with graphics and smart art, okay, they're really kind of cool. You can add, and one second. That's what I want. Okay, they're under the insert. You can add all sorts of things. The key that I'm going to say when it comes to that, when it comes to you can do like a hierarchy chart. You can do a pyramid structure. So you can do different things. A lot of times I'll use my smart art within my PowerPoint presentations. The key with Excel is clean and neat, not pretty and fancy. Because again, the key is that you want to get your information over as quickly and easily as possible. So you don't need fancy pictures, you don't need kittens or anything like that. You just want to give it. But if, in some cases though, you might want it to follow up with, let's say, a hierarchy chart or of the sales reps, which might also help explain why Jan had the smallest amount of sales and not the highest. So add-ins are like this little hidden gem that Excel has that gives it more features or functions that some people may or may not use. Analysis tool pack is a very common one. Euro currency tools, another common one. We'll play with Solver today because Solver is a fun one. I like Solver. And in future ones, I'll even show you Tree Plan. Tree Plan is cool because what it does is, if you've ever played with a decision tree, right? You have choices to make, and based on your choices, then there are other outcomes. One of the examples we used to give was with Tree Plan is, do I dig for oil or not? And you give the cost of digging versus not digging, site survey versus not site survey, and then the odds or the percentages of those results coming back positive to what you want. It then will break it all down, and it'll look at the cost versus percentage of success, and it will actually help you to determine which is the best course of action to take from percentages point of view. There's Risk Sim, there's Monte Carlo Simulator, there's great ones, but let's play with the Solver ad because that's like one of my favorites. All right, here we go. So the way that Solver works is, let's say we're a manufacturing company and we have a finite number of resources available to us. Each item that we make, we have a certain amount of profit, and each item that we make takes a certain amount of some resource. So in this case, my little Lego model, I can make Lego tables and I can make Lego chairs. To make a Lego table, I need 2 large bricks and 2 small bricks. To make a Lego chair, I only need 1 large brick and 2 small bricks. Right now, I am not making any tables. I'm not making any chairs. So therefore, that's why I have not used any of my bricks. And I have 6 large bricks available and 8 small bricks available. So now the question to you is, how many tables and how many chairs should I make to maximize profits? And just to play with this, I could say, okay, well, what if I made 1 table and I made 1 chair? So now if I made 1 table, it kind of makes sense. I made $20 profit and I used 2 large bricks and 2 small bricks. If I make 1 chair, again, I will now make $15 profit and I've used 1 large brick and 2 small bricks. Now you would obviously can see that whether I make 1 table or 1 chair, I'm not really optimizing profit because I still have a bunch of unused bricks. And well, what if I make 1 of each? Oh, I can do that. And now you can go back and forth until you find the optimal solution. But as you can see that there's probably not enough coffee in the day for you to do that. So wouldn't it be great if there was some way to do this? And the answer is yes. So with the solver add-in, and usually we go to File, Options, Add-ins, and that's how we do the add-ins. I've already added the solver add-in, and you could see it here. But here are other add-ins that are available to me, and there are other ways that you can get additional add-ins if you want. Okay, so what I would do is solver can be found under data. Usually with a lot of add-ins, there'll be another little menu that's called add-ins, but you'll see over here I have solver. The way that solver works is that I click over here on my total profit because that's what I want to optimize, and I say solver. And now solver by default follows in with the G11. So I want to optimize my total profit. All right. And that's us. I can max, min, or get a specific value. I want to maximize it. What am I going to change? My changing cells, which is C11 or which are C11 and D11. Okay. So I want to maximize my total profit by changing the number of tables and chairs subject to the constraints that my total used has to be less than or equal to the total available. Other silly little thing, you'll see it says simplex LP. That is the form of calculus that's using. All right, so it's a simplex model and it's linear because this is a linear programming model. When I say solve, solver finds a solution. It says, all right, I found a solution, and if I want, I can do additional reports like a sensitivity report, a limits report, but we're going to hold off on those for now. And I would just say, okay. So what solver did in a very quick amount of time is it said, in this scenario, if you make 2 tables and 2 chairs, I will use all of my large bricks and all of my small bricks, and it will net me $70 in profit. So this is like really a powerful tool, and okay, we can run it for different scenarios, but just to show you that, do I have a more exciting one? Nah, these are all boring. Okay, but the key is that if you were to change one of these numbers, our solution may change as well. So let's pretend that, let's try this one. Let's see if that one goes. So again, I want to solve total profit, and this is another one where now the tables are more than the chairs. And so we're going to solve for G11 by changing my changing cells, E7 and E8. I'm sorry, C11 and D11, subject to the constraints that I can't use more than what I have. And now, yeah, so here's why this is a good one. So now if you look at this one, because the tables are so much more profitable than the chairs, I'm going to make as many tables as I can. And then if there's anything left over, then I'll make a chair. And as you can see, because of the profitability, it makes more sense to make the 3rd table and not make any chairs, even to the point that we're leaving, we're not using all the small bricks that are available to us. And this is one of the things that solver will do, is it's going to give you, because I told it to maximize profit, it figured out what it needed to do to maximize profit. Now, you can then, if you want to have fun, you can put constraints on it where you have to make at least 1 chair and do all sorts of fun stuff like that. But in a nutshell, there are these add-ins that can help you to do risk analysis, either maximize profit or minimize expenses. You name it. There are great ones. The Monte Carlo simulator is another fun one. Crystal Ball is another simulator that you can use, another add-in that you can use. So there's a lot of different add-ins. And like I said, you'll more likely than not, when you go to an organization, there will probably be ones that they use. And they'll say, this is the add-in that we're using, but you may also find that some of your professors, they may use, especially if you're in business, they may use different add-ins. Okay, we made it. I have 5 minutes for questions, but Emily's question comes first because I said it would. All right, so let me pull back the gradebook. And sorry, oh, sorry, that's one I'm going to want to show you that. So, okay. So for the gradebook, what I did is for assignments, what I did is you'll see this little if statement. It says, if roster A4 is blank, meaning there's nothing there, then give me a blank. Otherwise, give me what is roster, which is this page, and A4. And they just work their way down the line. So the reason why I'm doing that, you see, if all of a sudden I were to add another person, you'll see that they get added in automatically. And again, if I enter the data once, so what I'm simply doing is each of these worksheets has a unique name. That name comes here. See, so roster, that's the name of this sheet, and then exclamation point, and then here is my cell within the roster, and this is A4. And then again, roster B. So that's all that is. So, and then again, and then it's just using them over and over again. So you'll see here, it says roster A1. So it's going to cell A1 on the roster page, and whatever it sees there, it's going to display it. And I do that for each and every page. And again, the reason why you want to do this is because it keeps things clean. As a matter of fact, you might have the semester or whatever, but the key comes down to is you need to each page has a unique name, and I like to keep it with something that's relevant, and then you're just referencing that. So I hope that answered your question, Emily. Also, I wanted to, okay. You have to, yes. So like an example would be, usually what I do, rather than typing it, I will say, let's break this. Let's break this. I do this. I say equals, and then I click on the page, and I click on the cell, and I hit enter. And you see, and now that filled it in automatically for me. And then once you have that, you can copy and paste it down. And you see, because I'm not using the conditional, I'm not using the if clause, when it sees the blank, it's interpreting that as a 0. I didn't like having zeros because that's ugly. And so that's why I added in that if statement. If the roster B4, if it sees nothing, then give me nothing. Otherwise, give me the name that's there. Now, in theory, you can even link to other spreadsheets, but we're not going to cover that in this class. But excellent question. Thank you. Okay. Also, if anybody else has any other questions, we're doing excellent on time. I'm watching, but for John Akinpora, here are for the pivot tables. Here are what the two that I used, and then if you want That's him on YouTube, and then him on Excel Campus. And he's got like excellent stuff. He's a good guy. Okay, I hope you found this useful. If anybody else has any other questions, that's great. If not, we are at 10 o'clock for once I actually kept my class on time. Thank you. Thank you. Have a good day.